So yeah, doing something a little different today, working on this journeyman knife. It's time to fit the guard. I figured I'd do something a little different than going through the whole forging process and showing you the same thing over and over as I make these. This is number 3, and I still have a couple more to make if I want to have them done by June blade show. So I got to get my tail to work, or at least work a little more. So what I've got here, I'm gonna be using a piece of 4/16 stainless steel to make this guard. In my process for doing that and making them, I just basically take a piece of 4/16 stainless bar. This is 3/8. I like using 3/8 for guards. Just looks better to me when it comes down and you got to sweep it back, that sort of thing. 3/8 thick looks really good. But before I start doing the slot cutting and all that to fit to the guard, I like to get this thing flat and cleaned up to around 600 grit on the blade side of the guard. And the reason for that is after I cut the slot and get everything fitting, it won't take much sanding to clean that up and cause any kind of issues where I've already made my fit up. I don't want to have to take a lot of unnecessary material off to clean it up. First thing I want to do is clean this up on the disc sander. So let's take a walk over there. So I've got a piece of 600 grit sandpaper here on my disc sander. This is my variable speed version. Some of this out of the way so you can see. And I just want to clean it up, make sure it's flat. Not much to it. So that looks pretty good. It's nice and flat, and I won't have to do much finish work once I get this slot cut. Let's go over there and start laying this out, get it ready to cut. I'm gonna show you how I do the fit up, that sort of thing. All right, so we can start laying it out, but the first thing I need to know is the width here. So I'm gonna take a set of calipers and make sure I'm zeroed here. But what I like to do on a hidden tang knife, I'm fitting up a guard, is cut my slot to where it's coming in to this curve that goes to the guard shoulder. I don't want to get above it. What I don't want when I cut the slot is to have slack in here. I like a tight fitting guard, that way it makes everything else fit up nice. Of course, I'll be putting line-up pins in here whenever I fit the handle, but in the beginning of that curve, which is right along in there. And I'll just lock this down. And I know that my shoulders are about 3/16. I like to leave a little meat above that. So you can use layout fluid or whatever you want. I just take a blue marker, nothing fancy here, and just mark it with my shoulder width about 3/16. I want to leave a little meat above that. So I'm going to come down about 1/4 inch. I'm going to make a little mark there, get this looking somewhat straight. And that will be where I start my slot. I just take my calipers that I've already locked down. This doesn't have to be super accurate. A couple thousandths is not going to hurt you here. So that's my slot right here. And I'm gonna put a center mark there, so I'll stay in the center of this piece. This is much wider than I need. Somewhere along the center there will be my center of the slot. Now I'm gonna just make me a center mark. And that'll just give me a guide. Now there's several ways to cut this slot, or at least 2 or 3. You can drill this out and then take files and file it out, like I did for many years. But I'm gonna be using a mill. You know, for a hobbyist, drilling them out and cutting those slots is fine. But being a full-time maker, I need to be efficient. So I use machinery, whatever it takes to get the job done quick and accurate. Now, one of the things you need to know is your tang thickness. So mine is about 157 here. And if you notice, I back cut that tang. So behind the ricasso is recessed. I want this to look like it grows out of the guard. So I did that on the mill as well. But I have shown how to do this with a file guide. You can even cut in the guard shoulders. This one I cut the guard shoulders and the back cut with the mill. I use a 3/16 mill to do that, by the way. Being I know I'm about 157 on my slot thickness, I'm gonna cut this with a 1/8 mill. But before I do that, I'm gonna come on the back side and I'm going to cut it with around a 3/16 drill, then mill it 3/16 down to where I'm leaving about 50 thousandths to cut the actual slot to. That leaves less file work or anything I got to do to make this guard fit up right. Instead of working 3/8, I'm going to be working about 50 thousandths, and that's plenty for fit up. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and mark this backside, cut this large slot, then we'll flip it over and cut the main slot. I've got it set up on a couple parallel bars. So I know the lighting's bad here, but I'm going to be using the stop nuts on the column here to stop the drill from going all the way through. I want to leave that 50 thousandths, so when I flip it, I mill it out here. I could use my DRO. It's not necessary. I don't have to be that accurate. If I was doing a folder, yeah, I want to be within a couple thousandths. So I'll go ahead and drill this out, then mill it. Now I'm gonna put 3/16 mill in here and get the slot cut to the same depth. Now because I've put a mill in, which is a little shorter than the drill I used, I've got to move these stop nuts up to match that cut I made with the bit. All right, now we're gonna go ahead, flip it, put in a 1/8 mill and cut the front side. Now I wanna make sure to just flip it this way and not spin it, just in case my center is a little off. All right, so before we cut our slot, we need to make sure that we know the thickness that our target is. And it is 0.154. So my end mill I'm using is a 0.125. If I subtract that away from 0.154, I'm gonna end up with 0.029 thousandths is what I'm measuring in. That's how much material extra I need to remove out of that slot to hit 0.154. I'm gonna take that off of each side so I keep the slot centered. So around 0.045, something like that. You also want to make sure your tang is tapered, because after you cut your slot, you start fitting it up and it gets real thick here for whatever reason, you start filing on it and then you overcut it. Make sure your tang is tapered and it'll fit right when you cut this slot. I'll also be using my DRO on this one because I want to be accurate and get a good fit up here. Now I'm going to zero my DRO. Now we're going to cut that 0.0145 off each side. We've also got to loosen up the axis. That way we can move back and forth. So I've got the mill extended down a little further for strength, so it's hard to see. First thing I'm going to do is start taking some off of this side. All right, that should get us. I left about a 1/2 tenth on each side. You see that up there? You can see that shelf in there. That's the front side. Now I'm just going to go knock the burrs off on each side and we can start tuning it up. All right, let's see where we're at. All right, right up to the point where we need to fit up. Now what I'm gonna do now is square up top and bottom of these shoulders on the guard. And I'll do a little fine tuning. I know I'm about a couple tenths or close to 1/1000 under right now. So I'm gonna use a file guide, set it up in there to cut these corners and fine tune it for the next part or the next step in the process. But we're very close. But you can see we're only fitting up about 50 thousandths in there, 60 thousandths, something like that. All right, let's get it set up in the file guide. So I've got this guard set up in there where it's just slightly proud of this carbide face. I mean, ever so slightly. I don't want to take very much off of there, just a little bit. Main thing I'm going to be working on is these shoulders here, these rounded shoulders, to cut them square. Then I'll roll it a little bit where it'll ride up on this radius here. That way we don't have slop on our guard. So I'm going to put this in a vise, take small needle files, and get that cut. I'm just using a little square needle file. I use several different kinds, flats, half rounds. I'm going to use square on this one. Start working that corner right there to square it up a little bit. This takes a little while, but you'll get there. You can see it's already squaring up. You know, they say a file only cuts one way or you'll dull it. There's been some tests proving otherwise, but you know, a handsaw only cuts one way as well, but you don't see anybody going with a handsaw, do you? Just a fun little fact. All right, that would be pretty close. Okay, before I go too much further, I'm going to further round the shoulders here to fit up against some guard shoulders in that radius. You don't want to try not to get over here too much. Just want to slightly round it. Right where that radius is. See where we're at here. Pretty close. And I can see my shoulders that they're cut far enough for the next step. We're going to take it over and do what's called a hot fit. J.W. Randall showed me this technique. It's not the same as heating it up cherry red, hammer it on like you do a traditional hot fit. Get it too hot, you'll cave in these edges where that shoulder is and where your shoulders up here hit. Then you'll have kind of a sunk in look. We want a tight fit. We want it to look like it grows out of there. You don't want to have to do a bunch of resanding to cut that out of there. So we're going to go take it over and heat it up to about 400 or 500 degrees and hammer it the rest of the way on. It'll leave an impression in here where our shoulders hit, and then we'll take it to the next step from there. So to do this, I've got the knife wrapped in paper towel and painter's tape. I'm going to take a piece of leather and put it right up at the plunge line, just like that. It's right behind the ricasso in the plunge line. And I'm going to bite it in this vise right there. Pretty tight. It's not going to hurt it. But this will protect it. And when we hammer our guard on, that should stop it. So I'm going to grab it in the vise right here. Pretty good bit of pressure there. Then I got a backing plate that I'll put over the guard once I hammer the guard on. It'll go like this. That'll put even pressure distribution on that guard when we go to hammer it on. And we're going to heat this up, like I said, 400 or 500 degrees. I've got a driver here made from pipe with a cap welded. That'll slip over the tang. We'll knock it on there. So we'll get the torch fired up here. Now, I'm not going to go too crazy with it. Like I said, we're going to heat it up enough, but not too much. Too much and you deform the front end, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to form scale on it. It gets hot pretty quick here. All right, that's pretty hot. Take a glove, shove it up on there where it needs to go. Our back plate. And that's it. I'll cool this tang off a little bit, let it cool up into it. I don't know if you can see that, but we got an impression in our guard and we're ready for the next step. All right, I got some better light in here. Hopefully you can see the impression there. Didn't leave as deep an impression here, which means my guard shoulders might be a little unsquare, but we're going to fix that right now. What I'm going to do is take a dental burr on a high-speed pencil grinder, like a Fordham tool, something like that. And I'm going to cut those shoulders down, those shoulder impressions down to where that tang will slip in a little further. And I'll do a little adjusting as we go, but that's the plan. So let's go over here. I'm going to be using a microscope to see what I'm doing. I'm half blind anyway. This is my setup. I don't have a ball vise. It's coming one day. It'll work for this. I don't do any engraving right now. It's not looking too bad. I could do a little more tweaking over there on the microscope, and I may, but it doesn't look bad. It can come out pretty good. And all I gotta do is profile the guard and finish this knife. But that's for another time. Hope you got something out of this video. If you got any questions, please leave them in the comments. I want to thank my patrons. I want to thank you for watching. See you on the next one.